to New Hampshire Unscripted with your host, Ray Dudley.
Matt, thanks for reaching out, man. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you.
Been a little quiet on the podcasting front for a little while, for many reasons, not to mention the big one.
Right.
So, real quickly, for all the lazy people who don't want to wait to the end of the podcast or whatever, tell us the name of the production, where it's going to be, and when it's going to be, and we'll recap that again at the end.
Excellent. You want me to take that? All right, I'll take that.
Yeah, go for it, Matt. This is your wheelhouse.
This production is called The Boyg, written by A.J. Ditty and produced by Theater Kapow. It will be performed at the Stockbridge Theater on the 24th, 25th, and 26th of September, and then performed at the Charlestown Working Theater in Charlestown, Massachusetts, on the 1st and 2nd of October.
Thank you very much. All you lazy people can leave.
Please stay. We're going to talk about some really weird stuff. You're going to want to stick around, I promise.
Oh, so that's interesting bait right there. Matt, why don't we start with you as the director?
Sure.
Give us an overview, and then we'll slide into AJ. And I got a lot of questions for you, brother. I've done some digging here, so I have some real questions about what's going on.
Okay,
Matt,
I can't wait.
Sure. Well, to start, I would say this production is one that has been going on now for several years. Theater Kapow, about 3 years ago, had the idea to do something with Ibsen's Peer Gynt, to do an adaptation or to do a devised piece based on Peer Gynt. And we were looking through books, copies of the play, of Ibsen's play, and one of them is 1957 Archer edition of Peer Gynt. And in that is a little newsletter called The Sandglass. And that newsletter has the story of Per Krogh. And Per Krogh was a Norwegian artist who illustrated the 1957 edition of Peer Gynt. But come to find out in this little newsletter that Per Krogh was imprisoned in a Nazi prison camp in Norway, in Grini, and that while in prison, he spent a lot of his time covering the walls of his cell with images of Peer Gynt. After the liberation of Norway, he returned to his cell and then copied those images from the wall down onto paper, and those are the images that we see now today. So when we became aware of that story suddenly overshadowed doing anything with Peer Gynt, and rather looking at the life of Per Krogh, the ability of art to help people get through difficult times, which is an interesting foreshadowing of difficult times we didn't even know were really coming yet. And I reached out to my buddy AJ here, and I said, I have an idea for a play, but I'm not a playwright. And I knew that he was really starting to write more and more. And I thought what I really wanted was not a Wikipedia entry. I did not want a time capsule piece or this biographical play, but I wanted a play that would resonate with contemporary audiences. And so I thought AJ's voice was an important one to involve. And that's kind of where we are a couple years later, and we have a play that goes up now in just a few days.
So what is your relationship with AJ before this that you to say, oh, I like the way he writes. There's something about his voice that I think can do this for us.
I'm also curious as to the answer to this question, Matt.
AJ and I met, at the Winnipesaukee Playhouse. I was directing a production of Accidental Death of an Anarchist, and AJ played the maniac.
Yes, yes, he did. That was a crazy play.
It's a crazy play. And
memorizing a phone book and just reciting it on stage. My God.
It was a lot. But what what was also part of that play, if you did get to see it, Ray, was a ton of improv, a ton of the actors dropping in their own bits and their own work was really on display. And so I very quickly became aware of the speed with which AJ thinks and the kind of the tempo and cadence of his comedic timing, just working with him as a director. And then I think it was probably a year or two later, I don't know, because that's now 6 years ago.
Oh boy.
AJ sent me Eloise Parker, one of the plays that he wrote, to read. And what shocked me about that play, which I've never told him, I don't think, was that
you're getting the
we're breaking an exclusive.
Yeah.
It's an exclusive. Oh, world premiere.
That he was still funny, but he suddenly reached into a much darker, deeper, and more like profoundly dramatic space. And I thought somebody who can do both those things is really special as a writer, that can be funny but also make an audience cry. And I think we see that in the Boyg as well. We get the sense of AJ's sense of humor, and then we very quickly, get into some pretty serious topics and still end the show, I hope, with some hope. And so that's how AJ got involved, and I'm so thrilled that he did, because he certainly took the ball and ran with it in a way that I never could have.
I'm so glad that this is recorded, because I will play this back anytime I'm feeling down in the
I'll make sure you get a copy, AJ. It'll go
Thank
right
you,
up.
Ray. Thank you.
We'll send it to your agent so that
Great. Yes. Take 3 talent. They're gonna love this.
Matt, when you had this idea to commission a work, did you know what you wanted? Did you have an idea of, okay, we want it to be revolving around this theme?
Yeah.
Because I know you guys are very theme oriented. Your season.
We are theme oriented, and no, I became real. I went way down a rabbit hole of all of these connections to Pierre Krogh, including other painters and other academics, and this web started to very quickly become unmanageable. And I think that's the point at which I was like, this is not a play. This is like an interesting documentary, maybe, but it's not a play. And so I very quickly kind of panicked and was like, here, somebody else take this, because I think Pierre Krogh lived a really interesting life, and one that I had no idea about. And so then once you start to kind of pull at the threads, you find another thing and another thing and another thing. And I think that, and AJ will speak about this, but I think that what he did really brilliantly in this play is that it focuses on 1 month in the life of this man who had this really incredible life. And so we're not trying to tell the entire story. We're trying to get a sense of the people. And I think people are way more interesting than things, even way more interesting than events. And so I think when we get to see the people of Barrack 12, we get to see the men that were there and what they went through, even in this little 30-day period, we illuminate something that I never really thought we would. And yeah, so we had an idea of what it might be, but it really needed the filter of somebody's reining it all in.
So AJ.
Hi, Ray.
The phone rings.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other end
comes company. Yeah.
And Matt says, hey, I need a project done, and I'm going to hand this off to you. And he gives you this big glob of stuff that he's been musing over.
Sure.
What was your thoughts at the time? I mean, obviously you accepted the challenge. So were you like at all tentative? Did you go, wait, I might be way in over my head here? Or were you like, oh no, I can handle this. This is easy.
I would say that I tackle every project with a not insignificant amount of anxiety. So Matt calls me up. He says, he emails me and says, we want to do sort of an adaptation of Peer Gynt that's also about the life of this guy, Pierre Krogh. And I had never read Peer Gynt. So already I'm like, well, I should probably read Peer Gynt. And if you haven't read Henrik Ibsen's Peer Gynt, it is 5 acts long. It is, I think it can be performed at 5.5 hours, and I don't like it very much. Matt loves Peer Gynt, a fact that I have brought up multiple times while I've been up here to throw him under the bus. But I basically, there were things in Peer Gynt that I really globbed onto, but for the most part, I found it to be interminable. And something must have just been lost in translation, because I've read multiple translations of Peer Gynt at this point, and some are much, much better than others and make me connect. And the one I read initially was like just boilerplate translation, so it was really stilted and really kind of a drag to get through. But then I was like, I finished reading Peer Gynt, and I said, you know, the one idea that I have for this play is I want one actor to portray the entire like townspeople ensemble, because there's like 50 or 60 characters in Peer Gynt, and I just wanted one actor who would come out on stage and talk to themselves as the multiple various townsfolk. And that was my one idea. And then I heard that Will Eno, who is a wonderful playwright, who among other things wrote the book for the Skittles musical, which is my favorite piece of his. That's not what he's most known for, but it is my favorite.
The musical about Skittles?
It was a commercial. Yeah, it was a 30-minute Broadway musical. Michael C. Hall was in it. It was an existential nightmare, and I loved every minute of it. He wrote an adaptation of Peer Gynt called Gnit, Will Eno did. And I was like, well, I should probably check that out to see like what contemporary takes on Gynt are. And 5 pages into his adaptation, an actor comes out on stage and portrays all of the townsfolk by themselves, and I threw the book across the room and I said, I have nothing. And it really wasn't until I started digging into Peer Krog's story that the entire play sort of solidified itself. The Boyg passage in Peer Gynt, the Boyg is a traditional Norwegian snake monster, basically, that devours like people who like wander too far into the mountains, and was supposed to be like, you know, a cautionary tale for people not to go wandering in the mountains, or else you'll be eaten by a giant serpent. And in Ibsen's Peer Gynt, and Ibsen wrote Peer Gynt while he was just like clinically depressed. He was in his 30s. His writing really wasn't taking off. He didn't know what he really wanted to do with his life. Most of the plays that we know by Ibsen were written when he was much, much older. So Enemy of the People and A Doll's House, that was written like much, much later in his life. So in his 30s, he was writing these big, epic, like verse plays, because Peer Gynt is written entirely in verse. And he also wrote a play called Brand, which I think is unreadable. It is so bleak and so like, that it really is a magnificent artifact to kind of sift through. But because he was writing these verse plays while he was in this really terrible depression, the Boyg that he presents on stage is just not a serpentine monster, but this great unknowable nothingness. Like Gynt stands alone inside a cave, and it's just pitch black all around him, and all we hear is this voice telling him, you know, you should stay a while, you know. Why self-actualize when I could eat you instead? So when I read that section, I was like, oh, the Boyg is depression. And reading the other primary source for this play, which is Odd Nansen's From Day to Day. Odd Nansen was a brilliant architect, a Norwegian architect. He was the son of Fridtjof Nansen, who was basically a Norwegian folk hero. I mean, he wasn't a folk hero. He was a real person, but he kind of reached the status of the mythic. He tried to discover the North Pole twice and failed both times, but he was sort of like the founder of like the independence of Norway. People in Norwegians love Fridtjof Nansen, and for good reason. He was a badass. But his son, Odd, was thrown into a concentration camp during the war because he achieved a certain level of like amongst the Norwegian intelligentsia. And he wrote a diary entry for every day that he was in a concentration camp, or almost every day that he was in a concentration camp, for 4 years, and was able to sneak them out with his wife and compile them into a book called From Day to Day, which we read. And it is such a thorough examination of a time in a concentration camp. And there was this one quote about Pierre Krog that really jumped out at me, and it was essentially along the lines of, there stood Pierre Krog, rumpled and depressed, looking like he was drowning in those uniforms that don't fit anyone. And it was that moment where I was like, okay, so if we want Pierre Krog to be the protagonist, and the Boyg that Pierre Krog himself illustrated is going to be depression in this play, then I think the journey of the play will be Pierre Krog trying to work through his depression while in this concentration camp. And speaking to Matt's point about the time frame, I find that, biographical stories as a whole usually fail if they try to get an entire life's worth of stuff into them, because people aren't themes. And I think Matt, you said that as well. It's they don't fit cozily into those confines. They change and they're erratic, and that's sort of what makes us human. And so those movies always, unlike stories and plays, always feel incredibly unfocused if you try and do an entire life. But if you get it into like a little tiny part of it, people usually behave in a much more streamlined way. So if you just focus on 1 month in December, we're focusing on the Pierre Krog that was there in December 1942. And even then, extrapolating and really making him into a very different character than he was in life, then we can get some really beautiful specificity out of it. So that was sort of the initial impulse to start writing this play.
So just as a warning for you two.
Yeah.
When I edit this, I'm going to put a title card in 10 minutes ago that says Ray is already in over his head. So,
No.
which I knew would happen talking to you guys.
Ray, listen. There's a question I'm really hoping you ask me, because if you do, I have a very convoluted answer for you.
All right. Well, if I don't, throw it in anyway, because I won't be able to tell the difference.
Absolutely.
I'll ask it.
Thanks, Matt.
As you, I love the mechanics of all of this that goes on. I love creativity, which is really why I love theater and good film, because it's such an amalgamation, a conglomeration of people who have worked together and things that people try to get out. You mentioned twice about depression, at least twice. It's interesting that a lot of great things come, unfortunately, out of artists who suffer these. You think of Van Gogh and now the Boyg being maybe depression.
Sure.
When you're creating, when you're writing, and then this one in particular, how many iterations did you have to go through to get to where you're like, okay, this is really something that we could stage? Or did it just, is it one of those works where you're like, oh no, we're ready to go? It's production worthy. Go. Because I know it's a struggle. I know you got to get that out and put what you hear here down here.
Oh, absolutely. And I think Matt can also speak to this, but I think before we started doing like real intense readings, we had about 3 drafts that I wrote and worked through sort of various ways to tell the story. Basically, your first draft of anything is going to be terrible, and that's fine. That's part of the process. You have to kind of exercise that demon from yourself and throw it on a page so then you can start refining. But, if originally this was supposed to go up in May of 2020, which obviously couldn't happen because, the world ended briefly.
It was pretty depressing though at that time. So.
Oh yeah, no. The play has also changed a lot, I think, since the pandemic. Not even in terms of so much of the writing of it, but as like what people take away from it is very, very different than when we first started working on this in 2018.
Yeah.
But yeah, it really was. It was about, I think, the main thing with plays like this is just not taking the coward's way out, I guess is the best way to put it. There were aspects of this that I didn't want to explore too deeply because I wanted to kind of protect myself and sort of protect the audience. But truthfully, the the best stuff comes when you are willing to be brave and willing to do stuff that scares you.
Yeah.
And what I love about this draft of the play that we did is that it was really harrowingly scary to write the end of this. And I think it actually has revealed a lot more truth than earlier drafts. But Matt, I think you could probably speak.
Is that on a
more to
personal level, AJ? Is it?
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think it can't really be overstated that the play changed because the world changed around it in a weird way. I think stories of depression and isolation are always going to resonate, but they resonate particularly well given what we've all been through in the past 18 months or so. So I think we did not. It's going to be very fascinating. There are going to be a lot of plays written in response to quarantine. There probably already are a lot. And there are going to be lots, and many, many, many of them are going to be horrible plays because they're going to be a little too on the nose. They're going to be about, some guy who grew a huge beard and whatever. Like it's just going to be not exciting or interesting.
Don't drag my beard, Matt. Why would you do
Yeah.
that?
I tried.
Jeez, what a knock.
We're on a national podcast right now. How dare you?
Yeah, not quite Joe Rogan, but we're there.
There you go. But I think the fact that AJ wasn't responding to the pandemic, but rather writing, the writing started beforehand, actually makes it a piece that resonates much better. Personally, I think that that's true. It's a little bit of there's like this tuning fork feel to it that I think literally in times the sounds feel a little bit like a tuning fork. But there's this this way that it hums now, I think that is very different than what I anticipated. And I know it must be different than what AJ anticipated because we just did not know what we were getting ourselves into. We certainly did not anticipate the pandemic. And yeah, so to see it now as it's staged, and also let me add on to that, the other artists involved in this production lived through the pandemic and then encountered this piece, and that definitely shows up in the performance, like in many profound ways, and then in some fun ways, like ultimately a bunch of actors getting together in a room and doing a show, even we are still in this pandemic, even now is an act of bravery, is an act of trust in one another. But they are, I would say, universally just thrilled to be back doing what they love to do, which is to tell stories together to live audiences. And so they bring that with them and this joy to do the work. And they also bring with them, some of their own demons from the last 18 months and having to grapple with those and being able to bring those into their work as actors. I think that flavors this piece in a really nice way.
That's good. That's good. I had done a podcast early on during the pandemic, and I think I brought up the point at the time that I was pretty sure that life has a way of forcing us out of our comfort zones, and I don't mean to trivialize the pandemic, but for creative people, something like the pandemic can make us see things now differently. We have to adapt. We have to reach for things we would not normally reach for, do things we wouldn't normally do. And so it's like nature forcing a reconstruction, a rewiring of the creative brain, so we're out of our routine. And that's really interesting that all of these people would have to go through that and then are in a play production that deals with this subject. Yeah. So what is the play basically? Can you give me a framework of
what the play about?
I know.
Yeah. I feel like we've talked a long time without pitching the play, Matt. Oh God.
What's the play about?
The newbies.
Yes, the play is about Pierre Krog and his time at the concentration camp at the Grinny at Grinny, which is about I think it's an hour and a half out of Oslo. Matt, is that right?
It's not even quite that far. It's probably about 45 minutes out of Oslo, I would guess.
About 45 minutes out of Oslo, and Christmas is coming up in obviously because it's December, and the Barrack decides to put on a production of Peer Gynt for the Christmas entertainment that year. And Peer Krogh, they get a new Barrack mate, a fictional character named Mikael Hortson, who sort of challenges the dynamic of the Barrack and sort of helps Peer get through his depression. And I know that this sounds kind of like a dirge, but it's got jokes and they're pretty funny. There is, in spite of everything, a ton of joy in this
Nothing
play.
like concentration camp humor. That's what I always say.
Yeah, it's I mean, it worked for Life is Beautiful. They won some Oscars.
And Hogan's Heroes. So there you go.
Yeah, sure. This is it is, you know, when you think about it, in the most dire of circumstances, humans don't ever want to feel that dire, so they will do their best to not feel that way and do their best to express their joy in any way they can. And I think one of the great things about this particular production, this group of actors, as we were talking about before, who had gone through all of these traumas and things, is that now they are able to take that joy they have of just being in the room with other actors for the first time in 18 months or so and put it into the work. So it really does radiate joy for most of the production. And then it gets very sad. And then it gets joyful again.
Okay.
If there's one thing I'm proud of about myself as a playwright is I take care of my audience. I take them to usually pretty dark places, but I know at least how to get them out of it and give them some sense of catharsis at the end.
Yeah.
So.
I want to, in a minute, talk to you both about the casting choices.
Mm-hmm.
But before we get there, Matt, and then AJ, when this production gets staged, is there something that you're really, really hoping is going to happen to the audience? Are they going to get something you hope, besides just being entertained? Is there? Do you see something buried in here that you really want them to go home thinking about or puzzling about?
Yeah, any particular thing, I wouldn't put that on the audience, but I always believe in all of the work that I do, or that Peter Kapow does, that if the audience is unchanged after the 2 hours in the dark with you, then why do it, right? So they have to have been affected in some way by the work. Otherwise, they could have stayed home and watched Wheel of Fortune or whatever. I don't know. So for me, it's always
come after us, Matt. You can't.
Yeah, I know.
You
sorry.
can't poke the bear of Pat Sajak and not expect.
Some folks like to walk right to the edge, you know, AJ.
Yeah, you know.
I know. I just don't want to be beaten up by Vanna White while I'm walking to Hannaford's later.
Well, that's good. No, but I do. I think we always talk about, as a company, we always talk about the car ride home, you know, and what is that car ride conversation? And we often will ask people like, so what was the car ride conversation? And they'll be like, it was quiet. Or we just talked about the whole play. A lot of people, I think, need to process work and then they wake up the next morning and they might talk about it. But I think it's nearly impossible. You would have to be pretty cold person to leave this production and not have some feelings, to have something you needed to talk about or explore or to think more about. And I that's what I want. Ultimately, I think we want not just to build audiences that are interested in contemporary theater, but we would like to spur curiosity, not just of theater, but of the human experience. And that's what, you know, AJ and I do that by producing theater. Other people do that by painting. Some people do that by making music, whatever it is. But we as theater artists believe that we have a pretty cool way of tapping into the human experience and showing that on stage for people. And yeah, that's what I hope. I hope that they leave changed for the better, obviously, but changed.
As Wicked once said, that they be changed for good.
That's correct. I was going to quote Hamlet, but you went with Wicked, so that's fine.
They are of the same caliber, Matt.
It's fine.
Reaching for that newer audience, that younger audience here.
Yeah. Wicked.
I mean, I think Wicked's like 15 years old now, or
They're old now. You know, I work with high school kids. They don't know what Wicked. No, they do know what it is, but
yeah.
That
yeah,
geez,
no,
that hurt.
Yeah, I know. Time marches ever on, and we're all gonna die.
Man.
So
yeah.
I think I would like to give audiences the opportunity to feel all of the emotions that they felt in the past year in public with other people around them, and give them a safe space to feel those feelings, and then release them up into the universe to let them go, to do, you know, I suppose what Aristotle always, you know, thought theater should be, which is just a great purging of the collective emotions. This play, by the way, is very not Aristotelian in a lot of ways, but like in that one way, I do hope that it provides that, because there's so many theater companies right now doing sort of escapist stuff, which I think is actually very important. I love musicals and I love escapist theater. I love, like, you know, silly love stories and all these, and had these things that just turn out happily. I love those. And I think they serve a vital purpose. But I think where we come in and what we provide that's a little bit different is that ability to feel your feelings loud and proud and unabashed. And that's really what I want people to walk away with, having had that experience.
I think Kapow probably embraces that. I'm going to guess more than 98% of the theater groups around. I mean, and not to denigrate the other productions, but I mean, Kapow's not exactly known for doing Annie, and I hammer on Annie a lot because it's done so freaking often. But you know, when you go
that jazz score, Ray, you can't beat that saxophone in NYC.
It's got a dog, it's got a kid. I know, it's got everything.
Yeah,
I know. But you know, when you go see a Theater Kapow production, you know it's going to be novel. You know, you are going there purposely to become a part of it. Something, you're not just there as a viewer. It's not a voyeur type of a thing, of an event. You actually go to a Kapow production to become invested in something.
Right.
And I think that it's one thing I've always, my hat's always been off to you guys for. You're not afraid to reach for that, whether it works or not in the production. You actually invite the audience to become a component of it, which I find to be fascinating.
They are very much so. And that is the case with this show too. Even though it's being performed at the Stockbridge, the audience is on stage with us. The audience is, I don't know, the furthest audience member is 10 feet from an actor. They are very much a part of it. The scenic design, which was done by Dan Daly, is such that you believe you are in the room with these guys. And sometimes that's great. You're at a birthday party, you're having fun, and other times you're really having to grapple with what it means to be in the room with these people while they're going through what they're going through. But for us, for Theater Kapow, it's always been about, you know, we change the audience configuration almost every show. We want that experience to be an experience, to break down, I think, that wall, that kind of traditional space between the audience and the actors that I think more and more companies are doing, this idea that there are people up on the stage and the lights are all focused on them, and then there are people out in the house and their lights are, you know, they're sitting in the dark, is a weird hierarchy that I think we've tried to break down quite a bit, so that the sense really needs to become that we're all part of that storytelling process and we're going on this ride together. And this is year 14, so far people have gone along with that pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, the story I always tell people when they ask about Theater Kapow back in New York is, I say, they're a theater company that's doing Sarah Ruhl's Melancholy play, in the middle of New Hampshire, which is something that I think they're not doing melancholy play in New York. Like these are like very risky ventures that I always so greatly admire, because, usually, it's not, we're not doing, Noises Off. I love Noises Off, but like, it's not the traditional sort of regional fair. It is challenging and it's beautiful. I mean, at least all the stills that I've seen over the years, it's like they're really creating magnificent art out here. And I think that's incredibly important.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Speaking of that, let's migrate over to the casting selections.
Sure.
I saw on Backstage the casting call, and there were some interesting requests there. Matt,
Sure.
you, in some of the ones, at least that I had seen, was listed non-binary, trans. Was there a specific reason you listed those, as just saying, male, female, whatever, or just even, I don't know, neutral?
I mean, I think first off, for me as the director, that was the request of the playwright. But I think more importantly, as me as a theater maker, there's been a lot of time in the history of theater where old white men have gotten their time on stage and their opportunity to have the spotlight on them. And I think the opportunity existed with this piece to change that paradigm a little bit, or actually quite a bit. And when we did so, even, AJ will answer this question because he's so waiting to answer this question, but we played with the gender. We played with gender as a concept, and we thought it worked in our heads. We thought it worked in Zoom readings. We thought, but I don't think we really knew it worked until we got it into the space and onto the actors that are here doing the piece. So, yeah, I mean, we wanted diversity. We wanted female voices, and we wanted to explore what gender really means. And I'm going to stop there because I don't want to touch on any of AJ's beautiful answer to this question.
All right, because I'm going to come back to you. I have some questions about this. AJ, fire away, baby. Why was it important to you? He said you requested that.
Yes.
And
it was initially Matt's idea, and I had not considered it. And then the minute he said it, it felt right. So there's a lot of answers to this question, and most of them, I think it's probably best that, honestly, the truth of it is, come see the show, and you'll know in 5 minutes why we made the casting choices that we did. Within 5 minutes of the show, you will believe that you are watching a group of Norwegian men. And it is a remarkable magic trick that, the theater is able to accomplish in a way that I don't think any other medium can. And it's really beautiful to watch. So you can come and make your own conclusions. And I'm just going to leave just a moment of silence here so people who don't want to hear my answer and don't want it spoiled can leave and come back.
Children can leave the room at this point, is it?
Great. So the play is not built in a masculine storytelling way. Most plays in the Western canon, specifically in the Western canon, were written by white men. And most of them base all of their ideas of playwriting on Aristotle. And Aristotle's whole way of designing a play was built around a male orgasm. So build, climax, nothing. That's how most plays are structured.
I am so glad I got out of bed this morning.
Just wait, Ray. It's gonna get so much cooler. Okay. But when reading Odd's book specifically, a thing that we talked about, Matt and I talked about a lot, was that it's long stretches of boredom punctuated by brief flashes of just absolute terror. And a playwright friend of mine, oh boy, I'm sorry, I'm going to try to not butcher their name, Amy Gibbers van Veek. Their name is Danish, and my Danish is terrible. Amy, if you're listening to this, I'm so sorry. I think you're a genius. They wrote a play called Feminine Octagon, or Aristotle Can Eat Me. And in this play, they attempt to structure a play not in the traditional Aristotelian structure of build, climax, done, but instead build it around a female orgasm. So you'll have build up, climax, stay on that plateau, and then might have like 2 climaxes in a row, and then you go back down in your plateau and it just kind of stays there. And then you think you're done, and then there's like 9 climaxes all in a row, and then the play ends. So the source material that we based this play on from day to day is structured in that way. So the reason why having all men in the cast actually doesn't work is because they don't fit into the structure of the play as we have designed it. This took a lot of thinking on my part to like kind of suss out why it worked so much better with female and non-binary folks playing the Norwegians and cis white men playing the Nazis. But that is, apart from, of course, all the power dynamics that are sort of come intrinsic in living in the patriarchal society that we, in this, horrifically sexist patriarchal society that we live in, all of those things notwithstanding, it is built into the foundations of this play that we need female and non-binary folks to tell the story, because it is ultimately structured as a story for them.
I can die happy now.
Well, every day a little death, or in this case, multiple deaths in a row, followed by a plateau, and then perhaps more little deaths, and then silence.
So I was going to ask you. So I had seen a still, and it had all the women in it.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah.
at this point, maybe I shouldn't say all the women if you asked for non-binary and trans.
Yes, women and non-binary folks.
There was a lack of men in the photo.
Correct. Yeah.
And it struck me because I had read the encapsulation of what the synopsis of what was about. I'm like, oh, this is not a bunker full of men here, males. And so that's why I wanted to get around to asking you about the casting. So do you feel, both of you, Matt and AJ, that this play has actually been strengthened by this turnaround? I mean, it has to have brought out a level, or at least a different viewpoint than what most people would see, right? Am I right there?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Well, for many reasons, Ray, and I think I assume that you as a director and your directing time would probably agree with me, but oftentimes a cast makes a director look really good, right? And so this cast makes me look really good a lot of the time. But I think more importantly, I just feel like there's something about agency here too. Like I said earlier, you're allowing you're giving space for female voices in this kind of male-dominated conversation. Even though they're AJ's words, they're the acting process, I think, is such a personal journey for every single one of these actors that I would never say that AJ's words are not relevant. They are, but these people are bringing so much more than just AJ's words when they're performing it.
100%.
And I think that. I mean, I know, Ray, you know Rebecca Tucker, but you do not know this Rebecca Tucker. You do not know this performance you will see is startlingly good. And AJ and I talk about, I think, her performance almost every night. We're like, holy crap. Because I think this is too simplistic, but in a way she's been moved from being in the chorus to being on, up front with the lights on her. And boy, is she growing. And all of them are in that space.
Then I was by myself. I got scared. I was in the Boyg.
Oh
Yeah.
God! Oh no! Get out of there! He's very mean.
I was starting to have all those female orgasms. I was having problems.
Here's my question, Ray. Matt and I were talking about this. Have orgasms ever been spoken about on this podcast? Are we the first?
Yes, you are. As a matter of fact, it's funny.
Yeah, baby.
Breaking new ground. I'm gonna have to conquer TV. They're gonna have to put this on at like 3 a.m.
You know what? That's the time where I thrive is 3 a.m. So
I didn't need to know that. Really, that was.
Oh no. That's not anything like that. It's mostly when I write.
That's
and
what they
drink
all
Dr.
say.
Pepper and cry.
So we were deep into the non-Aristotelian reaching
Serpentine
many
monster that
apexes
is
of
this
our
play.
life.
Yeah.
So I know Rebecca and I know Molly. I don't know many of the other. I know Nicholas. But having this, how do you honestly think having this non-male cast as the focal point has actually added to the play itself? I mean, because you would have a normal cast, it'd be a nice play, but you have brought it to a different level by doing this. You've taken it to some place that hopefully not a lot of people would do. And so I'm guessing that you're like, okay, we are getting currents here that would not normally be seen in a play, I guess, right? Is that too
I think
cheesy?
that's fair to say. Yeah. There's an electricity about it, certainly, watching these actors perform, and it does feel like the material is elevated by having their presence in it. Truthfully, and I gave my very sort of highfalutin playwriting theory answer to it, but truthfully, it really is something you gotta witness for yourself. Yeah, Matt, if you want to speak any more on that,
I just think it's impossible for me to see it any other way at this point. And I think that's good. As a director, oftentimes I'll see a show and I'll think that's a show I want to direct. Sometimes I see a show and I think that's a show I don't want to direct because the production I saw, I think, was just so well done and I can't do anything to change or improve upon that. And when it comes to this casting, I'm like, I just love this casting. I wouldn't change it now. I think the way that the story rolls off of these tongues is better than it would be if they were all men. And it is a little bit hard to quantify, and so I think AJ's probably right ultimately, which is take that leap of faith and come check it out for yourself. And
your cast is not. This is not a cast of slouches. Oh, nope. And I meant Carrie's in there too. But these are especially these women. I don't want to keep saying women because I don't know what they all are. All right,
you can say folks. These folks.
These folks are at their apex, right? These aren't like people who are just coming on the scene or at the end of their careers here. You've got people who are A-listers around this area, at least, right? Molly's no slouch. Carrie's no slouch. Rebecca's no slouch. I don't know the other ones, but
absolutely no, they are truly at the top of their game. Yeah.
It's crazy. I mean, and it is, the great thing about great actors is that they want to be pushed, and so they always want to be working with people who are at or above them. Like they always want to be pushed, and this company pushes themselves constant. Like they are pushing each other constantly in this production, and it's never one-upsmanship. It's always pulling in the same direction, but I think it's a tremendously talented group of people. It just really
let's talk about the B-listers like Nicholas.
Oh
yeah, Nick Wilder. That's slouch.
The out of work actors, we got to throw them some bucks.
It was awful nicey to take on some of those lesser folks.
Yeah, throw him a bone every now and again. That truly not in demand actor Nick Wilder. No, he is Nick is truly a fascinating actor, because I've known him since I think 2013, thereabouts. We've been doing summer stock together pretty much ever since then. And when I met him, he was one of the most fiercely comedic actors I'd ever seen in my life. The man had bits for days, and the physical energy to run up and down stairs and then fall down them, at one point, and was just really ready to give his entire self to the role. And it wasn't honestly until much later that I got to see him do dramatic work. And he was like unspeakably beautiful to watch. So there was such like reserves of emotion and depth in him that I just had never anticipated before. And so in this role, he's playing Captain Denzer, who is a Nazi that I refer to in the script as prime middle management. He likes to think that he's very good at his job, but he's just kind of a drunk who's very, very bad at his job. And he is the he could be considered the comic relief because he is such a buffoon, and who thinks that he's not a buffoon. And what I wanted to do was give him a role that could combine those high comedic chops with just like a very fierce dramatic bedrock. And what he's doing in that role is really quite terrifying. Somebody said that it's like Christoph Waltz in Inglourious Bastards, which I don't entirely disagree with. I didn't. That's not how I intended. That's not how I wrote it. But when I saw him do it, I was like, it's almost entirely who that character is. Except I would argue that Christoph Waltz is good at this job in Inglourious Bastards. Like he is incredibly efficient, whereas this character is much more incompetent, and thus funny. Also having a different sort of mind of funny. But yeah, no, I usually write plays. Like writing plays is like my love language, and I've been working with Nick and Rebecca for so long, and I knew I wanted to write a play where they could get to really show off their chops and their range. And I think that if there's one thing this whole rehearsal process has proved, is that this play is that play for them.
Yeah.
Matt, are there people who showed up that you hadn't worked with before? Are we going to see new talent?
Yep. You will. There are two members of the cast who are, I think this is true, I think they're both making their New Hampshire debuts, certainly making their Theatre Kapow debuts. Sabrina, who plays Mikhail, who AJ mentioned, is this. Actually, both of them are playing fictional characters, which is interesting. I don't know what the meaning there is, but
if only we had a playwright around. Huh.
Yeah, Sabrina comes in and plays Mikhail. I don't even know how to describe her performance. I hate saying, you'll have to see it, but she's a beautiful, thoughtful performer.
I would say the performance is like raw and like
very raw.
Yeah, like a real emotional tour de force. Is that fair to say?
There you go, an emotional tour de force. Yeah. I'll take that. And Lisa Boyette is playing Oscar Vallon, the old man, another invention of AJ Ditty. But they are, we did the audition, Ray, through Backstage. We saw, I don't know, 30 or 40 people submitted for these two roles. Mm-hmm. We saw almost as many, reels, and then some, probably half as many, then sent in audition. They filmed themselves and sent in auditions. And AJ and I said, let's have Lisa and Sabrina read together at their callback, because those are the two people we want to cast, and we just need to make sure that we're not wrong. And they did their callback on a Sunday afternoon, and we contacted them Sunday night and cast them. And they were here in New Hampshire 2.5 weeks later and started rehearsal, and it was absolutely the right choice.
Yeah, the scene that they did together, the line immediately after they finished the scene where we cut off the side, Molly, who's playing Frances Bull, has the line, yeah, that's it, that's the play. And after watching their callback, I think Matt literally said, yeah, that's it, that's the play.
But yeah, they're all great. I mean, they're all just really good, you know. And then you have, you know, my wife Carrie, who plays Odd Nansen, which is interesting in and of itself, because Odd is the impetus for so many of these stories. And so there's that responsibility of, how did we get these stories? We got them actually mostly from Odd Nansen, and Carrie plays that role, and Molly plays Frances Bull, and Rachel Longo, who has done a number of shows with Cahoon, plays Robert Riefling. And then I think one of the scariest moments of my life is Peter Josephson, who of course does tons of stuff in New Hampshire all the time, is in exactly one scene in this play. AJ has written him 5 pages or so, and you will not ever look at him the same way again. He's really terrifying character.
It's a nightmare. It's a real nightmare to watch.
Interesting. Very interesting.
He plays the character of the commandant. And it's, oh boy, it's a lot. There's a, yeah, and that one is actually, when you see the play, that story seems to be the most unbelievable aspect of the play that I added for like pure fancy, or like, you know, to really reinforce a point. And the scene that he's in actually did happen. That's based on a very real event. It is truly, in this show, the truth is stranger than fiction.
Yeah. Yeah, man. AJ, you're about to hand this off. Are you?
Yeah, we're freezing the script today, so I'm really like, good luck.
I mean, that's got to be scary, right? To let go of this piece of work that you've invested. I mean, obviously, it's in capable hands. I don't think there's anything real to be afraid of. But yeah. Are things being accomplished? Are you quite happy with, you know? Pretend Matt's not here.
Yeah, you happy?
Just
keep in mind, you're living in my house. No,
that is true. That is true. For the sake of me not being homeless, I am so happy. No, I truthfully, it would be so much harder to leave this production if it weren't in such capable hands. Like it, you know, you think when you write a play, you're writing a blueprint, right? You are designing a house, and then in order to build that house, you have to bring on a whole bunch of other contractors and builders and carpenters and plumbers and all that stuff. And no matter how good a play is, it's still a blueprint. It's not a house. And ultimately it looks great on paper, but it's not theater. It's not what theater is. And what Kapow has done is so extraordinarily well is to translate this onto stage and make it feel alive and living and breathing. I mean, Dan Daly said, you know, you feel like you're in the barrack with these guys, and it is, you know, harrowingly beautiful to watch them work their magic. You know, it's the hardest part of love is letting go, but if you're allowing your play to be happier, like allowing it to fully come into itself, then it's not really a sacrifice at all.
Yeah. So. Well, one of the nice things about this effort is it truly is a collaboration between the director and the author. Whereas many times you write a play, you send it off, and you may have given them a blueprint, but when you go to see the production, you're like, there was no window there when that's supposed to be a wall, not a window.
There are 9 jacuzzis in here. Who needs 9 jacuzzis?
Yeah. So I think the marriage of your intention with Matt's ability to capture it and put it onto a stage, in this case, I think really kind of trumps just sending it out into the wild and hoping some other group somewhere captures your idea, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And in the future, if everyone could just give me ideas for plays, I'm more than happy to write them than have to come up with them myself. That's a huge hurdle for me. I come up with like a good idea every like 2 or 3 years. So it is
Well,
nice to have somebody be like, "Hey, write this thing."
I think
And
I was out at your page, and there's if you have to scroll, there's quite a bit going on out there that you've written. Stuff about grapefruits and stuff. I said, I don't even know what's going on that page.
that was that was my college play I wrote, How the Great Grapefruit Dances in the Moonlight, and that was about um suicide again.
Another
it-
happy note.
Another happy one, but this one about teenage suicide. I wrote that play because I went to NYU, humble brag, and the professors there were like, there are no plays written for your age group anymore, because they thought all playwriting stopped in 1973. This is not true. There are many plays written for college kids. It's just that the most institutions who teach acting think that nobody's been writing a play since 1973 or 74. So I decided to write a play to sort of fill that gap. And it sort of built the ethos for all of my playwriting going forward, because I wrote that play specifically for friends of mine in the acting class so that they wouldn't have to do these terrible scenes from these old plays that they just couldn't connect to anymore. And I feel like I have been writing successfully for my friends ever since, and it's always made the work that much richer.
When we say old plays, we're referring to like Wicked, right?
Yeah,
Yes,
that's right.
Yes. A play with music. Yes, Wicked.
Yes. But I'll say too, Ray, Capello's done a bit of original work, and we've had the playwright in the room a couple times, but it's different this time for a number of reasons. I think, AJ and I are friends, and we had worked, our working relationship was that director-actor relationship, and then then just as being friends and people who meet up in the city when I'm there, and we enjoy each other's company. I hope I'm speaking for him.
Oh, absolutely. He came to see me with Paddington Bear.
I sure did.
At 10 a.m.
But with this piece, AJ's been in every single rehearsal, and as I said, living in the Cahoon household, so it's pretty immersive. Like, we go to rehearsal, we get home, and usually we're going through the script and going through notes at some crazy hour of the night, and then coming back and getting back into rehearsal. And so it's we're really living with this play, and that has made it, I think, definitely made it a richer experience. It was funny when you said, it never even occurred to me, of course, that AJ would have any trepidation about walking away at this point, because why would it? But you're right. I think many people would be a little freaked out, but we've been so close working on this piece, and we've worked on it for so long that I know that. And it's not my capable hands. It's the hands of this company and this group of actors, really. And I'm super excited for AJ to have no idea what the lights look like or what the sound sounds like, and to walk in, a week from Saturday and just be immersed in his own piece, which is really cool.
I'm going to cry a lot.
You'll be wearing your tuxedo opening night? You're gonna have
Oh, I don't own a tuxedo. I'm a playwright. You think I can afford a tuxedo?
Aren't the royalties just rolling in? What are you talking about?
I have a smoking jacket I stole from the Flea Theater. Yeah, the Flea. You don't pay me, I steal your clothes. What now? Come at me, Carol.
Before we close, I just wanted to touch, you had mentioned Dan Daly real quickly, but he is so well known in these circles for his visions of sets. I cannot wait to see this, because I just love his work. It's every piece is unique. It's like he reinvents himself every time you ask him to do something.
Yeah, and And it's crazy. Like I spent a lot of today building these little tree things that Dan had designed for this piece. And on their own, you're like, what is this? And then in the whole, you're like, holy crap. Like, and he's so brilliant. He's so kind. And he was literally, he and Teva Young, our lighting designer, were invited to the very first reading. And we were just like, these are the designers who we want to start getting their brains into this piece from very, very, very early on.
Yeah, like for the first, he was there for the first draft reading, and you don't invite designers to the first draft reading usually.
He was there. And the other thing that's wonderful about working with Dan is that he storyboards. And so he has this, he would never call himself a director, but he has a very directorial eye. And so he'll say like, oh, I thought in this scene, so-and-so would stand on the table and hold up a bed sheet. And you're like, okay, yes, they will now stand on the table and hold up and I texted him yesterday because he's actually on the road. He'll be here in New Hampshire momentarily.
Like he's right there.
Oh, hi. And I just said, he makes, again, somebody else who makes me look really good. There are several times during the run last night where I was like, that's a beautiful stage picture that I literally had nothing to do. Like Dan has created little nooks and crannies and levels, and they go into them, because it's a natural place for them to be, and they're just beautifully designed. And I also think that, and this is what I love most about Dan Daly, is a lot of people perform in front of scenery. You perform in a Dan Daly set. You really do.
Well said.
Yeah.
Well said.
The one thing I'll say about Dan, because I agree with everything that Matt said, but Dan asked me during the first design meeting, he was like, so do you like surprises in your set? And I said, yes. And he was like, cool. And he came back, and I'm not going to spoil anything, but there are some really cool surprises in this set that are beautiful to watch. Yes. Yeah, that's all. Dan's great.
Good.
Yeah, and I, we haven't even seen Teva Young's work yet. She's here literally 100 feet from me, focusing the lights for the show. But Teva's done the lighting design for every Kapow show for almost 8 years, and is probably my closest artistic collaborator other than my wife, and is an amazing artist. And so these two together, it's just so dangerous. I mean,
it's a reckoning. It's going to be a huge, wonderful reckoning.
And I didn't even mention Jake. Jake Hudgens is doing our composing music for the piece.
That's right.
So there's just so many people.
Wait, this is a
on
musical concentration camp comedy? Is that?
Wow.
So there are 2 songs in the show. Well, 3 technically. There are 3 songs in the show. One is the Norwegian Happy Birthday song, which is objectively one of the worst songs ever composed. It's so delightful, and you'll have a great time watching it. But it's happy. The American version of Happy Birthday is superior, and I know that's going to get me a lot of trouble with the folks in Oslo. But you know what? Come at me. We have the better birthday song. The second one is the Norwegian national anthem itself, which is actually much better than ours. So you know what? You win, Oslo, on that one. You get that. And then there is one final song that is entirely instrumental. But throughout, he's composed a soundscape for the show. He's made a sound for the Boyg that will haunt you because I can't get it out of my head. And the way he does it is actually one of the most genius things I've ever seen. And I don't know how you come up with something like that. But it's it sounds, for lack of a better word, it sounds like a violinist in hell. And I think it's just awe-inspiring.
It sounds like a theremin, but without the electricity, which is amazing. Like that doesn't make any sense to me. Like that.
Yeah. And it's somehow coming at you from the bottom of a well.
Right.
Oh my God.
That he can pitch bend. Yeah. I mean, you have actually nobody's going to see it because he's off stage, but I should take a picture of that. This is Jake making the Boyg sound because it is misusing many instruments in beautiful ways.
We had to break so many laws of music.
Well, is there anything we did not cover? Anybody you need could give kudos to, or anything that we need to go over or flesh out?
Yeah, so there are a couple more. I'll just mention my stage manager, Ryan Lepresti, because a good director should always mention their stage manager. But also, I think for Theater Kapow, the big thing for us is funding, and we see 50 people on stage for this show, and I've got 5 people from New York or 6 or 7 people from New York living in an Airbnb. We could never, ever pay for our productions just on ticket sales alone. And we've been really fortunate. The New Hampshire State Council for the Arts gave some grant money for this. And then we were fortunate to receive money from the federal government through the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant and through the American Rescue Plan. So when people have that opportunity to advocate for either state or local or federal funding for the arts, please do so, because that absolutely has an impact locally. Allows us to do this type of work rather than another production of Annie for Ray to tour. So you want to see more Boygs and fewer Daddy Warbucks.
Yes,
Please
please.
contact your local Daddy Warbucks and get him to petition the government to give us some money.
The real Daddy Warbucks.
Mm.
All right, guys. Well, thank you for asking me to do this. I really appreciate it. I'm fascinated by it, and I'm going to get out there to see it. Matt, why don't you give it to us again one more time? Where, when, how much, whatever.
Yeah. The Boyg, as written by A.J. Ditty and produced by Theater Kapow, will be performed at the Stockbridge Theater, which is located on the campus of Pinkerton Academy in Perry, New Hampshire, on Friday, the 24th of September through Sunday, the 26th of September. There is a matinee on the Sunday afternoon, so those of you who may not want to drive at night could see it then. And the tickets are $20, I believe, in advance and $25 at the door. So it behooves you to buy your tickets in advance. There will also be a streaming option for those people not yet ready to come to the theater. I guess one thing we didn't mention is kind of the COVID part. We are a fully vaccinated company, and we are requiring both vaccines and both proof of vaccination and masks for our audience members. And that's just because, as I mentioned earlier, you are real close to the action, and we want to make sure everyone feels safe while they're here. And then we have a second weekend, which is going to take place at the Charlestown Working Theater, which is in Charlestown, Massachusetts. And that is October 1st and 2nd. It's a Friday night, a Saturday matinee, and a Saturday night.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. AJ, thank you. I really appreciate your time here, guys.